Welcome to Teacher Talks. I'm Maria Keffler.
I'm Erin Brewer, and today we're going to talk about the way that the trans industry uses suicide threats to manipulate people. And I can't think of any kind of emotional blackmail that's stronger than a suicide threat.
This reminds me very much of having a boyfriend or a girlfriend who threatens to kill themselves if you break up with them. This is an abuse tactic. It is emotional manipulation. And the gender ideology activists are using this to, they're teaching it to kids so that kids can get what they want from their parents, from their doctors, when maybe the things that the child wants are not really what's best for them.
And one of the things that's most concerning is it's normalizing suicide, as the activists are constantly throwing out suicide and saying that children will kill themselves if they're not given what they want. It's normalizing suicide. And that tells not just children who have gender dysphoria, but all children that suicide is an appropriate response to not getting what you want. And that's a very dangerous thing to teach to children. We should never have suicide be an option. And as activists continually talk about this as if suicide is the only option for kids if they don't get what they want, it's only going to increase suicidality among our children. And that's on the activists. That's on activists who are saying it's okay to, well, first, it's two things. First of all, it's telling children that it's okay to use suicide to manipulate people, but it's also giving them the message that if they're not allowed to take on this alternate personality, that they cannot survive who they are. And that's just not true. We know that the vast majority of children who go through normal puberty without even therapy, just naturally progressing through puberty, will have these gender dysphoric feelings resolved. That's basically telling the vast majority of children a lie, and that's really dangerous. It makes me incredibly angry that the opposition just throws around suicide, especially when they have nothing to back it up. There's absolutely no research to substantiate their claims. The research we do have shows just the opposite, that those who medically transition and surgically transition have increased rates of self-harm and suicidality.
When you look at some of the research that supposedly undergirds the suicide statistics that kids will commit suicide if they don't transgender themselves, if you look at those, they are so methodologically flawed. Most of them are very small sample sizes. They're self-selected. So the people who are studied are ones who have chosen to participate in the study, who are already trans-identified, and we know that the vast majority of people who are transgender identified have comorbid issues. They already have depression. They already have autism. They already have trauma in their past. And so when you really look at the studies, they do not hold up scientifically. And I've heard of situations where pediatricians, therapists, and heaven forbid teachers have said right in front of a parent, if you don't affirm this, your child will commit suicide. How will you feel if you cause your child to commit suicide? That is a terrible thing to say to a parent, and it should never be said in front of a child, because that introduces the idea of suicide to the child.
And as we know, suicide can be a social contagion. They've done a lot of research about this. And one of the reasons that media guidelines around talking about suicide are so strict is that there's evidence that shows that if we start talking about suicide, we can actually induce suicidal thoughts in people. And that's exactly what's happening when you have activists, teachers, therapists, doctors, parents, friends telling a child that they're going to be suicidal if they don't get what they want. It's increasing the chance of a social contagion. Before we go, I want to emphasize that if you have a child who's threatening suicide, that you need to seek appropriate care. We don't want to minimize suicide threats. We don't want to in any way suggest that a child is using it just to manipulate their parents. And suicide threats in all cases should be evaluated by appropriate mental health care provider.